Hey folks, welcome to the market internal review for August 25th, Friday 2023. I am recording this on August 27th, Sunday 2023. So Friday we opened up with $1.79, just shy of $2 gap up after Thursday's sell-off. So Thursday we hit a particular high here, which I'll detail what that was here in just a moment. Had a hard reject after a small gap up, filled the gap range, and continued to go lower. Good signal of weakness is previous day's TWAP. When we can't hold that, that's a good indication of direction for the day, if not a sustained chop, which you can look at the first standard deviation high and low from previous TWAP. That'll kind of help give you a sentiment for the day. So Thursday, we had a nice sell-off pretty much all day, and it definitely was over the monthly deviation. We hit a almost $8 day, so quite an immense amount of sell. We did not make a new low for the month, but we certainly tried. Broke all the way down to the second deviation low on TWAP into this weekly gap, and that's roughly right where we stopped on Thursday. So to head back into Friday, somewhat of a similar pattern where we have a little bit of volatility coming in from the J-Pow Jackson Hole symposium type thing. It is kind of confusing, honestly. The news showed that it was potentially Friday into Saturday. I swore I saw on FX Street that was earlier in the week as well. Either way, the market makers will use whatever they need to. The gap here for the daily is essentially right where we wicked. The high wick here broke through Thursday's TWAP price into the previous day's mid-range and halted basically right there before slamming back down through the gap. So this was a lot of turbulence and a very tight range. Now I don't have the expected move for Friday. My indicator, for whatever reason, didn't price it in and I didn't capture it. So kind of flying blind when it comes to the Friday expiration options market. I know from Thursday that Fridays was about a $4 range, so we could bring that in, but I don't even think it's worth it because it's not accurate, and I only like using accurate data. Either way, the morning session, we come out hot on tick. I mean, really hot. 1,300 stocks upticked to start the day. They closed up there. Add and Vold green, trends are green. But notice we've got this whole block here of candles that aren't really doing anything. Just an immense amount of fighting. Very tight TWAP bands, not usual whatsoever. So very interesting to watch that. And then we get this insane volatility spike. TWAP's wiggling around. I haven't seen it zigzag like this at all ever, but you can see why. We broke high, broke low, back to high, back to low. One thing to note, Mercy also showed the extreme bullishness, potentially overbought nature of the market to open up. And we get this crossover, and it's also showing some of the zigzag. It's being drug around by tick. Then we start to see a cooling off on MIT via the trends, down for volume and price, and then we also see the band dimming. Volume actually was leading this time around with a red reversal signal before the price did. Trend is in the imbalance, and we see the average tick closures heading towards the downside after an extreme bullish tick closure over this Thursday TWAP price. Mercy is signaling red as well, right around 10:30. That is right where we get a standard deviation TWAP entry for my strategy anyways, using TWAP as the as trailing stop, and then we also use previous TWAP prices here and here for profit targets. So very good trade setup. We have a lot of extreme tick closures as we come down past previous day second deviation. So that trade, when you start having these, that's definitely a good signal to get out. That full retracement of the massive engulfing candle into previous TWAP level here is definitely your sign to get out. But these average or these extreme bear tick closures are certainly a much earlier sign, especially when you're seeing them 1, 2, 3. We get a little bit of breathing room here, and then another one, and we start to question how much more of those are we really going to see. That trade was very decent short side. Getting out of that area though, we quickly reject TWAP as we come back into here. But this whole shape, I want to key in on this because I'm seeing it quite often. So we have a sharp move, and then we get this little pattern here where we break back above from the first standard deviation from the low, wick back down, and stop above the first standard deviation low. I can't tell you how many times I've seen this where it's actually a very good reversion setup. And interestingly, the trend is disappearing here. It's starting to weaken. We're not seeing it at all when this whole move occurs. And that's right when we burst up. I mean, that's a $2.50 move. Beautiful movement all the way through. We even have a nice little retest on the TWAP, and the top of the gap is in alignment with that first standard deviation high. For the rest of the afternoon or midday session really is the oscillation of the gap. Incredibly annoying. Add and vol bands, just price volume for the exchange is just all over the place. No real direction. We see trend balance pop its ugly head up. Not much else going on. Till the end of the day, we start to find a little bit of clarity. I'd argue that it wasn't clear at the time, but the turnaround really occurred around that 1:30 time that I always like to come back and check the charts. When I see us basing over here, not once, but twice, after we already had this hard sale that we retraced into, that's certainly more of a thesis that we're potentially going to be heading back up here. So now that we've seen trend balance, we know we broke the second deviation low on the session. So it's plausible that we'll see a second deviation high on the reversal side to the highs. So following that setup, we get that cross on the average closures for tick, roughly, I think it was basically right about here, right as we start to reclaim this first deviation low from Thursday's TWAP price. And that's a pretty good setup. If you just even got the previous TWAP price, that's $1.70. If you waited for a higher closure of full second deviation high, you got another $2.50 there. So mostly very clear. We don't make it much higher, which is also right around where Mercy is showing exhaustion to the buy side potentially. Given that we're in trend balance, I wouldn't expect a whole lot more retracement considering what we've done with the deviations. And then we'd start to cool off. We don't really make any new lows past the midday session here. We actually close right at the first deviation high, right at Thursday's TWAP price. So overall, from the lows to the close, about $5. So it was a decent amount of work that SPY put in, and it was overall a pretty good day. So much as you didn't get caught in this little oscillation move here. So mainly just trying to trade the extremes. And for Friday, I think overall it was decently smooth. Flipping over to the entire market, the New York Stock Exchange Composite Index showing very similar movement, or rather I should say SPY, you can see showed very good alignment to the entire composite index, which, if you notice, for the Mercy, you could have already seen that as well with almost no divergence. So very cool to see that data is accurate. And we had that violent drop that did lose the low of previous day for the composite index, but we bring it back right above, struggle around TWAP, and hit that monthly TWAP high for the day right around the mid-range for Thursday's price. And that's basically right where we stopped. So overall, we have a couple of things to note here. I'm going to go full screen. If you've watched these videos, you know I like to look at the monthly TWAP. I like to see where structure is in relation to that. And Thursday, we had that high rejection, and that happened to be, I believe, the NVDA earnings, and took us into the first deviation on the monthly low area. And I've said before, I feel like it's a cheat when the options market isn't necessarily a part of this ride up into the range. So whenever I see something like this, I expect at least some kind of retracement for the options market to basically position themselves, close hedges, and all sorts of things, take profits or secure losses. This was a pretty big retracement, and we hit the monthly low first deviation on the composite index, and then that's where we really failed to hold that and just came lower for the rest of the day, reaching previous, which would be Wednesday's low, which is actually where the whole thing closed up for the day. As far as SPY goes, so SPY, they came about, let's see, oh, no, that's not SPY. SPY should be loaded here. Okay, so SPY came about $2 from making a new low on the month. I did post a little poll out there on YouTube. Just curious what everybody thinks for this month, if they think we're going to make a new low or not before the end of the month. There's not very many days left. And then as far as Thursday goes, so earlier I mentioned there was a hard rejection of something and that I would point it out. Interestingly, right after NVIDIA earnings, SPY opens literally on the monthly TWAP. And this hard break was previous day high, also a TWAP, monthly TWAP level. We rip right back into monthly TWAP, only to knife it right back out under TWAP, and then we just continue our sell-off. So the complete reversal of the entire lower deviation for monthly TWAP and even more. So this was a surprise. I think I tweeted somewhere around here that we had completed what I expected to be mostly the range for the day. And when we started bouncing up here, started to retrace the TWAP price, and boy, we didn't hold it. We broke right back down and then made an even lower low, which was quite insane. The TWAP pretty much all day was never green. And I think I see this a lot, and I'm starting to pay a lot more attention to this color when we're retracing and we're just seeing a little tiny bit of green and mostly bright, some bright red and some dim red in here. This is kind of like a fake out. And you can see over here on Friday, we had a similar setup where we kind of rip up, we had a gap up, and then we knife hard and reject and make quite an extreme low, but then we start to retrace. Now this time, you'll see the TWAP is actually a brighter green. Sure, we got some red in here, but it's still brighter green, unlike over here. And you can kind of see it just in the price action as well, where this whole range, I think we hit 25%. Yeah, so 25% is going to be roughly right about here. And of course, that's basically where we reject. So didn't even make that 50% rejection, or retracement rather. So not a good sign for the rest of that day, which this one though. So here we got bright TWAP band showing green. That confirms or aligns with this price action we're seeing, versus over here, some smaller bars for the price action. We see these huge bear bars, but then these tiny little bull bars. Versus over here, yes, we have some insane bear bars, but then we also have some pretty insane bull bars off of that low green TWAP, more engulfing bars all the way up, and we reclaim 50% of the range. So from here, I would expect either to flatten out for the rest of the day, or we could go lower or higher. So in this case, because TWAP is green, the ticks overall, which I'll show you here in a moment, start to accumulate towards the upside of the ratio. That's where finally we start to see some good relief and more of a continuation for a reversal. So given that we closed up into the lower first deviation on the month, I'm still going to say that I'm in the no new lower low for the month. I think that even though we've dragged this down, the monthly TWAP, I do still say that our range of where we're going to finish is somewhere in this first deviation. I would be surprised if we broke 450 before the end of this month. So we'll see. Q's actually had a little bit more strength. Either that or I think their range is a little bigger, but their low, they only came within just shy of $4 of. So definitely had same aggressive sell, roughly same kind of criteria for how all the all the price was delivered and what it anchored off of. But really crazy to see these monthly TWAP levels just continuing to be the perfect bounce areas. Price really seems to respect those standard deviation based TWAP levels. Crazy. As far as the Dow did not retrace into first deviation on the month. We had a couple mercy squeeze signals, and you can see by the accumulation, it's mostly balanced. The Russ had a similar kind of setup for the day as Dow had. It did retrace its gap. It closed almost right above and did have that same kind of bullish reversal towards the end of the day. By midday, we were doing the same thing as SPY. Again, I'm not surprised here. 2,000 stocks and the New York Stock Exchange, so they're both mostly in sync, so that makes sense to me. Going back and just looking at the internal charts, so here we see the trend setup, mostly that sell side indication, potentially oversold, but I've been going back and doing a little bit more research on trend, and my suspicions are definitely confirmed that it can present some skew and some inaccuracies given that the volume is given heavier weight. I have actually tried to develop a new arms index trend type formula to try to de-weight the volume, but honestly, it somehow ironically always comes back to the same kind of structure, the same kind of price. So I'm not really sure there's much I can do there, but we show that balance area here towards midday, and it is mostly balanced if you look at the way this is set up. As far as the volume, so volume actually did end in that kind of beginning bullish area, and you can see that turnaround even in the volume. We kind of teeter at a balance, which makes sense. We're at zero, and we then finally hit that reversal a little after 1:30, almost 2, and that's really where we take off, right from the 0 point. And you'll see tick mostly kind of showing the same thing. We're balanced most of the day. We see that hard knife from JPOW, the JPOW effect, but you can tell we were really volatile there for most of the day, hitting extremes on both sides. So that is shown up here, shows up on MIT, and that's an extreme balance where we're going to oscillate and bing bong to highs and lows. So definitely seeing that. And you do see this average starting to trend up. It's mostly flat here, and you can see it's starting to trend up a little bit. And we do see a little bit of that, but not much until, no surprise, around 2 o'clock. Same thing for price. Price starts at highs. So to start the day, 1500-ish, We saw that kind of confirmed in the tick, and here's that hard knife, and we go all the way down to negative 1,000 in decline. And this is where we kind of already start our retracement earlier. That's where on SPY I showed you the lower deviation TWAP was reclaimed. That's kind of this price action right here actually. And then we finally break over zero and start to balance out. So we get a little bit of that range, which I think you kind of see it in structure here, but it's certainly right here. We get that range bound from about 11:30 till almost 2 o'clock, and that's really where we start to see the advancement. VIX started up pretty high, not quite at 18, 17 and a half ish, but it spent basically the whole day in decline. As far as the entire SPY sector goes, we've got some interesting data here, I think, where we did save that weekly trend, and then we get the NVDA effect, I'll call it. Notice it opened right below the 20 SMA on the daily. Couldn't reclaim that quarterly trend line yet. Closed below the 10, and then Friday we basically closed right under the 10. Now we do see consumer discretionary starting to rise as far as the average trading range, and we see from RSI standpoint lots of lows, which we've been in a decline, since late July. So basically the whole month of August, which you can see it obviously here. If you've been trading, you know August has mostly been a downtrend, and we finally starting to see a handful of them starting to bounce up just a little bit. Energy still seeing a ton of volume, 20 mil. Industrials 13. Finance was the heaviest at 40 million. So if you go look at banks, there's a ton of them that are still not doing so hot. So I don't know. I don't think there's any dip buying there yet that I would be looking at. But depending on what happens, I'll be posting screenshots for news and whatnot. Finance could be in even more trouble. So all kinds of news about that. Looking at the stocks above 20-day range, we're definitely at relative lows. For 20-day average, rather, not range, 20-day average SMA, we're only sitting at about 15 to 20% of the 500 S&P stocks above their 20-day average. So not very many. Looking at the 200, still roughly about that 50% line, and this is a weekly, so this is just for the whole entire last week. 100-day, basically 50-day, starting to come down even further, so no relief there. More stocks still falling relative to their 50-day average price. Growth stocks, I don't think my indicator charts the growth stocks. We're sitting at 30% for 20-day average. So heading into next week, starts tomorrow. I haven't watched, I don't think futures is open yet. Maybe it is. But I'm going to be watching 438 on SPY, depending on where we open up. And I'll be watching for any kind of bounce towards 443, which is currently our monthly TWAP price. Seeing how we react there is going to be incredibly important for what the rest of the month is going to give us. If we're going to head down, then I'm going to look for 438, 433. If we head up, I'm going to cautiously look for 449. And I highly doubt 454. If we do hit 454, that would be very crazy. But those are some of the levels that I'll have on tap. To be watching all the monthly TWAP levels. Previous day high, we did hit 445 technically with the NVDA pump. Whether or not we will even visit that is not known to me, but if we can reclaim a monthly TWAP, then perhaps. But that's definitely something to watch for, that 445 area. So there's some weight there. Main thing I wanted to call out was this kind of pattern formation around the lower TWAP band, and just kind of review a little bit of the alignment between the market internal RSI and the New York Composite Index. That's showing very good alignment there. And that pretty much wraps it up, folks. I hope you had a good week. Hope you had a good weekend. Don't know that we have any big earnings, but I'll try to find a calendar of that and post that as well. Thank you for watching, and as always, happy trading.